last week we moved through the next portion of our story in Exodus chapter 3. Remember, we're at the burning bush moment. There's stacks of handouts if you didn't get one yet. We're at the burning bush moment, okay? Where Moses has been in the desert now for how long? Do you remember?
40 years.
40 years. He's been wandering, if you will, as a shepherd of his father-in-law's flock for 40 years. He's been in this wilderness, and it's the same wilderness that he's going to spend another 40 years in with the children of Israel. He doesn't know that just yet, but this is where we're at, okay? So that's the place. And as he was out tending the flock or shepherding the flock, leading them through the places in the desert where he knows that there's food and water, right? He comes across a burning bush. And it wasn't any burning bush. What was different about this burning bush?
It wasn't the same.
Yes, the bush itself was not like burning up. There was this flame, perpetual flame, but the bush wasn't like disintegrating. It was whole and still living in there with this flame coming from it. And so he turned from the path, which means he left what he was doing to go over and see. And when God saw that, he turned. That's what Scripture says. When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush. So, this is that moment. They're having this conversation, and we've broken down what Moses has said, what God has said. We know that when God called him, he said his name twice, which is this like sign of endearment, right? Of relationship. And so God called to him, and Moses' response was one word: Hene. Hene. And Hene means, here I am, ready and willing to do whatever you tell me to do, even before you tell me to do it. Which, as I said, this is the word we want our young children to learn. Hene. God speaks to him and tells him that he has seen the misery of the people, that he has heard their cry, and that he has come to rescue them. God has come to rescue them, right? And so we ended in verse 10 last week because he's telling Moses, like, now I'm going to send you. He says in verse 10, now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people out of Egypt. And now we're getting to Moses' response. Chapter 3 is all this back and forth between God and Moses, okay? So I know I'm stopping us in the middle of their conversation, but let's pick it up right here. Moses says in verse 11, my translation is the New Living. It says, but Moses protested to God, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? God answered, I will be with you. And this is your sign that I am the one who has sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain. But Moses protested, if I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask me, what is his name? Then what should I tell them? God replied to Moses, I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my eternal name, my name to remember for all generations. Okay, that's where we're going to stop today. Because I'm just going to tell you now, we can do several weeks worth of study on just verses 14 and 15 alone. I had to really rein it in, okay? Y'all are proud of me. You only have 3 pages of handouts. And if you're looking online, you can look in the notes. There's a link to the handout there for you as well. So I want to break down a little bit of it, and then I really want to get into what God says his name is, okay? So the first thing, I titled this study today, Who I Am versus I Am. So this is a question I think we all ask, like, who am I? Who am I? Like, who am I? Right? And this is what Moses is saying, right? He's like, well, who am I to go do this? And God is like, I am. It's like, it's not about you. I think we've heard that around here before. It's not about you, Moses. It's about who I am. It is not about who you are. And so the interlinear translation, it reads like this, but Moses said to God. My translation said protested. That's just some liberty I think that the translator took there, because the Hebrew does not, It's just like spoke. It doesn't mean protested, okay? But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, that I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? Now, we know Moses, we talked last week about how maybe part of the reason he hid his face when God began to speak to him was because of the guilt that he was carrying. For 40 years now, he's been in the desert where he ran after he murdered the Egyptian, right? And then after the Hebrews that he approached who were fighting were like, hey, are you going to kill us like you killed him? And it became this known thing that Moses was a murderer, basically, even though he was in line to be the next Pharaoh. He spent 40 years in the palace being trained and prepared to potentially become the next Pharaoh. And then he murders the Egyptian and he runs to the far side of the desert, the opposite direction of Egypt. And he's been carrying this secret. You know, I even wonder, like, did his wife know? Did he tell anybody? So when God approaches him with the fire, he hides his face, right? And so now his response is, well, who am I to go to Pharaoh? I mean, I feel like that's kind of like a loaded question in a way, because he's like, well, first of all, surely you know what I've done. I mean, he knows what he's done. But then he's having to go back to Pharaoh. He has to go back and confront the people that he ran from. So he's like, I think you got the wrong guy here, God. And as we progress in their conversation, he is going to keep saying the same things. But this is his first statement. He's like, who am I to do this? Now, verses 9 through 15, I liked this explanation from BibleRef.com. This whole, from 9 to 15, verses 9 to 15 reveal God's commission to Moses as his spokesman. Okay, God is calling him to a great task. It says God provides reassurance in response to Moses' doubts. God also identifies Moses using terminology which will be crucial in both Jewish and Christian understanding of his nature. As a name, God uses the phrase I am, indicating his eternal, uncreated, necessary, absolute existence. I love that. This connects to the Hebrew term Yud-He-Vav-He, most often seen as Lord, Yahweh, or sometimes translated as Jehovah. We're going to talk about all of that today. Jesus will use the same phrasing as we know in the New Testament when he says I am, when he makes his I am statements. Okay, so I want to just briefly bring in this teaching that I learned elsewhere, because basically Moses is responding with doubt. We're going to see him continue this in the conversation, but this is like his first kind of moment of doubt. But this is the interesting thing, like, what is doubt in Hebrew? We know what it means for us. It's like this mental confusion. I'm just not quite sure what I should do. But what is it in Hebrew? Well, in Hebrew, to doubt is to hesitate or to pause. Because Hebrew is an action, right? So to doubt for us is it's a mental process. When I'm doubting something, I'm talking about what I'm doing in my head. In Hebrew, when you're doubting something, you're frozen. You're pausing. You're hesitating to take the next step. So when Jesus looks at Peter when he got out of the boat, right, and he's walking on the water, and then he saw the wind and waves and he began to sink, and he's like, Jesus, save me. And when Jesus pulls him up out of the water, he's like, why did you doubt? Is how our translation reads it.
Why did you stop?
Right. But that's the question, is why did you pause? Why did you hesitate? That's really what he was saying. Why did you stop walking? So, Moses is responding to God's call with this hesitation, with this doubt. He does not see himself as the best person to free the Jews or as an appropriate leader for the task. Probably because right before he ran, those two Hebrews that he was trying to break up the fight were like, who died and made you king? Who are you to tell us what to do? And now he's supposed to go back and be their actual God-given rightful leader? So there's some hesitation. There's some pause there of like, God, they don't respect me. There's surely, after 40 years, they probably still know. That's kind of a cultural thing with the Hebrew people, is like, once something happens within the community, it gets passed on. That's why when the wine ran out at the very first miracle Jesus did at the wedding in Cana, when that wine ran out, if there wasn't more wine to come, that entire family would have been shamed. And the whole community would have been shamed, because it would have been like, oh, that's the town where they had the wedding that ran out of wine. So this is when something happens, it doesn't just kind of go quietly under the rug into the night. It becomes a thing that the community is reminded of, and it affects everybody. But so he's doubtful. This is interesting. There's a Hebrew word for doubt called safek, And then there's a word for certainty called vadai. Okay? Both of these words, I love this, neither of them are found in the entire Bible. Those two Hebrew words, the word for doubt and the word for certainty, are not, those specific ones are not found in Scripture. This rabbi says, nowhere does the Torah mention the Hebrew forms for doubt or certainty. Both of these are rabbinic origin. So that means that as the rabbis are telling things and passing things down, they begin to use words like doubt and certainty. Like they're starting to weave those in. But when you read the actual Torah in Hebrew, when you read the Old Testament in Hebrew, this idea of doubt isn't there. But we see people play it out. There's pause, there's hesitation. I just thought that was interesting. It says to have faith is to act on the words of God without hesitation. I'm going to say that again. To have faith is to act on the words of God without hesitation. Faith is, ladies, not something that I have. I can't say I'm a woman of faith. I have faith. I do faith. I act. That's what that means. It says to have faith is to obey. To doubt is to delay obedience. See the difference? It is not to have mental confusion or cognitive dissonance. To doubt is to not step forward. That's it. So doubt, in many ways, is the opposite of faith. We like to say fear is the opposite of faith, right? We have our shirts that say faith over fear and that kind of thing, right? But really, faith is moving, it's forward progress, and doubt is pausing or not, like being frozen. So faith and doubt are the two kind of opposites, if you will. And I put the link there for you if you'd like to go read that article where I got this information. It was pretty interesting. So the second thing we see here, so he responds with doubt, and then Moses questions who he is instead of who God is. That's big. Instead of going, oh, who is this God that's calling me to do this? And, he's not really so amazed in that moment. In that moment, he's focused on himself. Who am I to do this, right? So this is basically like excuse number one is his identity. I can't do this. I don't know who you think I am, God, but I know who I am, and I'm not the guy. I can't do this.
This just feels so significantly important for anything we do.
It is.
I mean, how often do we doubt or not have faith, or whichever one of these words you want to
Right.
use? But really the point of it, if you really get down to it every time, is because we're expecting ourselves. It's like, it truly has nothing to do with what we're able to do.
It is not about your ability. It is not about your skill level. It is not about your expertise, your experience. It is all about your willingness. That's it. Take the step and let God do the rest. And so God, I love this. God doesn't tell Moses who Moses is. Did you catch that? There's really no conversation yet about anything about who he is or his abilities. Moses is going to be the one that brings all of that up in this conversation. Not God. God is not concerned with who Moses is or what his abilities are like. And we're going to see later when Moses starts to go, but I can't speak, right? And God's going to go, who made the mouth? Right? That's the argument we have here. Who made the mouth? But we're not there yet. I don't want to jump ahead too far. But God, what he's doing is God instead tells Moses who he is as God. He shifts the focus off of Moses and onto himself, onto God. Because this is not about you, Moses. This is about me. This is about what I am doing. God's identity was more important than who Moses was. When we know the God who is with us, we can step forth confidently to do his will. That's David Guzik says that. When we know the God who is with us, we can take that step with confidence and boldness and certainty. And we don't have to pause or hesitate because we're like, oh, we don't know what's going to happen, but here we go. We're taking the step because I know the God that's with me. So, Moses also, as he's asking who he is as a man, what he's saying is he doesn't feel qualified or confident to answer God's call, right? I don't have that self-confidence. We put a lot of emphasis on self-confidence in our society. Yeah. Like, you need to be confident, right? I like the saying, like, I don't need self-confidence, I need God confidence. Or you could just squeeze it together and call it Godfidence. Okay? I need Godfidence. Not self-confidence, because it's not about myself. It's not about what I can do. God has prepared me along the way with every random job that I've had, with every little thing that I've studied, the hard places of my life. God has used all of that to prepare me for what He knows is the next thing He has for me to do. It's on-the-job training, girls. That's what's happening. And it says, God often calls unlikely people to accomplish His greatest tasks. Isn't that what we've seen with Abraham, with Isaac, with Jacob, with all of the, like, they weren't great people. They screwed up royally multiple times. So He calls unlikely people to do really great things. It says now God is calling an 80-year-old exiled shepherd. I'm just going to say, girls, what if your greatest calling in life comes when you're 80?
I'll be there for it.
Hello? That's what we're reading. And we're like, oh, they lived longer back then. 80 years old. It's still unlikely at 80 years old. Right? God's calling an 80-year-old exiled shepherd to rescue slaves from the hands of the world's most powerful ruler. Can we get our brain around that? The world's most powerful ruler. This is who Moses, the shepherd who's been living out in the dirty desert for 40 years, is supposed to go before. And go, God says to let His people go. It's crazy. Moses realizes the difficulty of this mission. I understand his pause and his hesitation. And I think God does too. Only God's power would be sufficient to accomplish it. That's the whole reason He's calling Moses, because Moses cannot do it on his own. He cannot do this without God. Moses' greatest need, and ours too, as Tony Evans says, is not self-confidence. He needed God confidence. But I still say we make God-fidence a word. Okay, so in verse 12, and He, God, said, I will surely be with you. So God promises to be with Moses. In the ancient Hebrew culture, the concept of being with someone carried significant weight. It implied not only physical presence, but also support, alliance, and shared purpose. This preposition is frequently used in covenantal context, where God's presence with His people is a central theme. The idea of God being with His people is a recurring assurance of His guidance, protection, and blessing. And what does Jesus say in Matthew 28:20? And be sure of this. I am with you always. This concept of being with, it's not just, oh, I'll go with you. Yeah, I'll run that errand with you. This is like a covenantal kind of phraseology here of I'm with you. I'm your ride or die. Like where you go, I go. It's that kind of, I'm not leaving your side. You can't get rid of me. I am with you, right? God is promising that He will be with him, and this is Moses' confidence, is in this statement. And then God says, when you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will serve God on this mountain. I find that interesting because God isn't saying if. He's saying when you do, I will, or you will worship me. This is a statement of fact, like it's already happened. Because we know God is the God of past, present, future. I love the way, I think it's Tony Evans that used this analogy. It's like when we watch a parade, let's pretend we're watching a parade go by. And the only really good seat, like the only one left that we can get, is that there's this like fence, privacy fence, and there's a little knot hole, and we're like peeping through the hole. And we're seeing what passes in front of the hole, right? This is the part of the parade we get to see. God, however, sees the parade from above, looking down. He sees the parade back at the back where it starts. He sees the parade at the end where it's finishing. And He sees it all along the way. He sees every aspect of that parade while we're doing this. So He knows. He knows exactly what's going to happen. And He's telling Moses, He's assuring him, this will happen. This is already a done deal. I need you to do this for me. Here, God revealed His purpose, right? God wasn't freeing the Israelites so they could sit around and be lazy. That's the other thing. They're going to come here and worship. He was freeing them so that they could do what they had been created for. He wanted them to worship Him. Wherever God delivers you from something, He also delivers you to something, Himself. And that's a quote by Tony Evans. He had a plan, and that plan was they are going to come out, and you are going to come back to this mountain, and you are going to worship me. In fact, this is the very mountain where God is going to give them the 10 Commandments and the Torah. And where Moses right now is hiding his face, afraid to look at God, this is where he's going to come back and say, show me your glory. I want to see you. He's going to have that progression in his relationship with the Lord where he's not hiding anymore, but he's like, I want to see more of you. I want to see your face. I don't want to turn away. So this is where it's going to happen.
It's so awesome, like knowing further beyond this, and later on, when he's in the presence of the Lord, his face is literally completely transfixed and changed and glowing, and so it's just like a really cool look at it.
Right, because he starts out with, don't look at me.
He ends up hiding it afterwards, but hey, whatever.
But the point is that his heart shifts from hiding to wanting to experience it, right? So God says to him further, Moses now is going to respond to God. Moses said to God, suppose I come to the sons of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they say to me, what is his name? It's kind of like, what's the password? So it makes me think of, like, knock on the door. What's the password? What is his name? What shall I say to them? What am I supposed to say? So now God is questioning, or Moses is questioning who God is. So first he's been questioning who he is as a man, and now he's going, okay, well, who are you, God? Who are you? What am I supposed to say? Because he fears the people's response. How am I going to prove to them? Because they know what I did. They know who I am. How am I supposed to go back to them now? And they believe me, right? So now he's asking, his next excuse is, God, I don't really know who you are, so I can't do this. That's kind of excuse number 2. Well, I need to know more about you before I can do this for you. Right? And so I like this. Moses has a conflicted identity with the Hebrews. He is a Jew, but he was not raised as a Jew, remember? Even whenever he showed up back in chapter 2, when he ran and he showed up at the well, and that's where he met Jethro or Ruel's, the priest of Midian. He met the daughters who were there with the sheep, and he watered their sheep. They go back and tell their dad they met an Egyptian. He doesn't even look like a Hebrew or a Jew. He looks Egyptian, right? So he was raised as a Egyptian. He was not raised as a Jew. He is one of the enslaved Israelites ethnically, yet he lives in exile and away from that slavery. He hasn't been, for the last 40 years, he hasn't been undergoing all the harsh treatment that they have. He hasn't been watching the babies get thrown into the Nile River like they have. He's been removed from it, right? Moses is understandably nervous to approach the Jewish people and demand they obey his instructions. Even when he lived in Egypt, the Hebrew people saw no reason to think of him as an authority figure. So again, he's like, I need to know who you are if you're sending me. When God revealed himself to man in the days of the patriarchs also, it was often associated that we've heard God himself say, I am, or is El Shaddai. El Shaddai, which means God Almighty, right? And so that's the name that he's been called by so far by the people of Israel. And so now he's like, okay, well, what name am I going to give them? Because when you appeared to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, like, you used a name. So what am I supposed to tell them? Is your name now? Like, is it the same? Are you El Shaddai? Like, what? I don't know. What am I saying, God? So it says, so if Moses were to come to the elders of Israel as a representative of God, it would be logical for them to wonder, by what name did God reveal himself to you? So it is kind of like, what's the password? Like, how do we know you're not a false prophet? How do we know God spoke to you? You need to give us some more information here before we can believe what you're saying, okay? And I'm thinking perhaps Moses wants to know what to say to the people, maybe more than he wants to know who God is for himself in this moment. Because he's so focused on what are the people going to think, and not so much enthralled by who are you? Who are you, God? So that was just another takeaway that I saw. And God said to Moses, here we go, I am who I am. And he said, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent me to you. Now, in Hebrew, I am who I am is Eyeh Asher Eyeh. That's what he's saying. Eyeh Asher Eyeh. And basically that phrase means, I am what I am, I will be what I will be. And it is also like a past tense. It's all of the things. He will be, he who will be, is and has been. It's all of it. He's self-existent in that statement. He just is, and he must be. That's what this Hebrew phrase is telling us. Now, I want to play this video for you because it just explains a lot in a very succinct time. And for us to keep moving forward, I think it would be helpful to watch it. So if you're watching online, I will tell you the links are in the notes. If you click on the actual lesson notes, you can find the link for this video. So let's watch this one right quick.
For thousands of years, every morning and evening, Jewish people have prayed these well-known words as a way of expressing their devotion to God. They're called the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And as for you, you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength. Look at the second key word here. Lord, written in all capital letters. This is the personal name of Israel's God. We first learn the meaning of this name in the story of Moses and the burning bush in the book of Exodus chapter 3. God appears to Moses and he commissions him to liberate the Israelites from slavery. And so Moses wonders, what if people ask the name of the God who has sent me? And so God responds, tell them, Ehyeh has sent me to you. Now, that Hebrew word Ehyeh means I will be. In other words, God's name means that he is the one who is and who will be. God's existence doesn't depend on anyone or anything else. This God simply is. But it will sound kind of strange for Moses to go say to the Israelites, I will be has sent me to you. Only God can say, I will be. So in the next sentence, God tells Moses the version he should say aloud, Yahweh, the God of our ancestors, he has sent me to you. Now, that word Yahweh is the ancient Hebrew form of the verb he will be. And this is the personal name of the God of Israel. It appears over 6,500 times in the Old Testament. Now, here's what's interesting. Over the centuries, Israelites wanted to honor the sacred nature of this divine name. So, as they read the Hebrew Bible aloud and they came to this name, they stopped saying Yahweh and instead started saying the Hebrew word for Lord, which is Adonai. Now, this practice has been continued throughout the centuries, and so later, when people started translating the Bible into English, they adopted the same practice. Instead of spelling out the divine name, they translated it as Lord, spelled in all capital letters. Okay, you got that? Good, because there's more. Ancient Jewish scribes wanted to prevent anyone from even accidentally saying this name aloud when you read the Hebrew Bible. And so they came up with a visual device to remind you to make sure you say Adonai. They took the 4 consonant letters of the divine name. These letters correspond to our English letters, Y-H-W-H. Then they inserted the 3 vowels from the word Adonai and combined these together to create an artificial hybrid word, which if you pronounced it, it would say Yahuwah, but no Israelite ever said Yahuwah. It's simply a visual reminder to say the word Adonai. Now, it gets more interesting. Much later, Christian scribes came along who didn't know that Yahuwah was an artificial word, and so they began to say it aloud and spell it in their writings. This is the word that eventually entered into English as Jehovah. It's a word many people still use today. But the main thing is, the word Lord in all capital letters is an indication of the divine name. Don't confuse it with the word Lord in your English translations that's not in all capital letters. That is the actual Hebrew word Adon, which just means Lord or master. This word can refer to people like kings or the master of a servant, even a shepherd over his sheep. And sometimes biblical authors will use this word to refer to God, like in the phrases the Lord of all the earth or the Lord of lords. But behind all of these words, Jehovah, Lord, Adonai, stands the original divine name of the God of Israel. It refers to the one who was, who is, and who forever will be.
Okay.
Thanks for watching this.
That is just, I think that's a quick way to explain. I just like that video. It tells us a lot of information because it can be confusing, and we have done long lessons on this, and so I don't want to necessarily do that again unless we want to or we need to. But this is what God was saying in verse 15. He says, thus you shall say Yahweh, which is the V and the W are interchanging, okay, for us. Yud He Vav He are the letters. God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial all generations. This is to my memorial, all generations. That's how the Hebrew to English would read. Okay, Yud He Vav He is known as also as the Tetragrammaton. Okay, that is, it just means 4 letters. All right, that's what that word means. The interesting thing that they showed us is this Yud He Vav He has no vowels, so nobody knows exactly how to say it. Right? You can't really pronounce it. Can you say a word that's just consonant? It's impossible. I like the complete Jewish Bible translation, and I put it in here for you because they actually spell it out. It says, God said further to Moshe, that's his name in Hebrew, say this to the people of Israel, Yud He Vav He. And then they put Adonai, right? Because you're not supposed to say Yud He Vav He. Just so you know, Jewish people still to this day won't even write the word God. If you're looking at a website that's written by Jewish people, it will have a capital G, a dash, and then a lowercase d. Because they won't even write the name God in English, okay? Trying to keep it holy, right, and separate. That's the way that they do it. But it's spelled out here, Yud He Vav He, because you can't pronounce Yud He Vav He, right? And then it goes on, to say that we understood where Yahweh and Jehovah come from, that these are attempts to add vowels to be able to make it able to pronounce, pronounceable. These 2 videos from gotquestions.org, and then the next one, I want to show you the one from gotquestions.org real quick. It's like 2 minutes long, I think, just because it goes into a little bit more explanation, and then I want to end with the last one over here. Again, these are all in the lesson notes that are in the show notes below. Okay. All right. Let's watch this one. Oh, this one's 3 minutes.
What is YHWH? The ancient Hebrew language that the Old Testament was written in. Only language. In the original Hebrew, God's name transliterates to YHWH, sometimes written in the older style as YHVH. This is known as the Tetragrammaton, meaning 4 letters. Because of the lack of vowels, Bible scholars debate how the Tetragrammaton YHWH was pronounced. The Tetragrammaton consists of 4 Hebrew letters, Yod, He, Wa, and then He repeated. Some versions of the Bible translate the Tetragrammaton as Yahweh or Jehovah, most translate it as Lord in all caps. Contrary to what some believe, Jehovah is not the divine name revealed to Israel. The name Jehovah is a product of mixing different words and different alphabets of different languages. Due to a fear of accidentally taking God's name in vain, the Jews basically quit saying it out loud altogether. Instead, when reading scripture aloud, the Jews substituted the Tetragrammaton, YHWH, with the word Adonai, or Lord. Even in the Septuagint, Greek translation of the Old Testament, the translators substituted Kyrios for the divine name. Eventually, the vowels from Adonai, or Elohim, found their way in between the consonants of YHWH, thus forming Yahweh. But this interpolation of vowels does not mean that was how God's name was originally pronounced. In fact, we aren't entirely sure if YHWH should have 2 syllables or 3. Any number of vowel sounds can be inserted within YHWH, and Jewish scholars are as uncertain of real pronunciation as Christian scholars are. Jehovah is actually a much later variant. The word Jehovah comes from a 3-syllable version of YHWH, Y-E-H-O-W-E-H. The Y was replaced with J, although Hebrew does not have a J sound, and the W with the V, plus the extra vowel in the middle, resulting in Jehovah. These vowels are the abbreviated forms of the imperfect tense, the participial form, and the perfect tense of the Hebrew being verb. Thus, the meaning of Jehovah could be understood as He who will be, is, and has been. So what is God's name, and what does it mean? The most likely choice for how the Tetragrammaton was pronounced is Yahweh, Yahweh, or something similar. The name Yahweh refers to God's self-existence. Yahweh is linked to how God describes himself in Exodus 3:14. God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. God's name is a reflection of his being. God is the only self-existent or self-sufficient being. Only God has life in and of himself. That is the essential meaning of the Tetragrammaton, YHWH. Got questions?
All right. Now, so the last one I want to show you today is interesting because there is no way to just to say these words. Again, so what I want us to understand is it's not like God told what we're reading where it says God said to Moses, say Yahweh. It's not like God pronounced it for him. Where we get Yahweh is a man-made concoction. So we don't really know exactly how God said it to him. But I think this video is super, super cool, and I wanted to share it.
How do you pronounce YHWH when there is no vowels? To say it correctly, you don't use your tongue, and you can't close your lips. So his name imitates the natural act of breathing as you inhale and exhale. So this is how YHWH sounds like. Can you imagine the first word you have ever spoken when you came out of your mother's womb was the personal name of God? And the last word you will ever speak in this life, the last breath you will take on your deathbed, will be the name of God. How do you pronounce YHWH?
So, perhaps that's how you pronounce it. So that idea being, I love the way he described that, and I wanted you to see that that's way more powerful than me reading this to you. But the thought that scholars and rabbis have is that the YH sound would be the sound of the inhale, and the W or the VH would be the sound of the exhale. That we say God's name with every breath. This goes even further. I'm going to pick this up next time because I don't want to rush through it. But I want to look at the pictorial meaning of the name, and I also want to look at the numbers as well. Because we know Hebrew is a 3D language, and so we can find out what Yod He Vav He means in the pictures and numbers too. So, thank y'all for being here. It's on your sheet, the link there. If you go to YouTube and type that in, you'll find it. I'm not sure his name. How to pronounce YHWH on YouTube. See that blue? The blue line? Underline? That's it. I'm not sure. I saw his name, but I don't remember what it is right now. So, we'll pick it up here next time because I don't want to rush through the ending. So, thank y'all for being here. Thank you for joining us online. Again, if you want to watch all of these videos, then click on the lesson notes. And then in the lesson itself, you'll see the links to all of these videos for you to follow up your study. So, have a great week, and we'll see you next time.